as we go forward. So my next guest is a numbers guy and can sort it all out for us. Please welcome to the show America's accountant, Dan Geltrude. Dan, thanks for sticking around. We're spending more on less. And as I always say, it's getting easier and easier by the week to bring in $100 worth of groceries from the car, right? It's not a big deal anymore.
That's certainly true, right? So when we're looking at these retail sales numbers and they look pretty good, other than the fact that we have inflation built into that, Scott. So what's happening is, as you said a number of times, people are spending more and getting less. So that's really a bad formula for the American consumer. Now, let's factor in on top of that, Scott, that we have credit card debt that is certainly going to be rising. I just read that a report that said 35% of Americans expect to rely on credit cards for these holiday season purchases. That's up from 29% last year. So again, not a good sign that we're going to have people probably involved in what I would say emotional shopping, emotional purchases, spending more than they should. Now, it may feel good now, but let's see what that hangover feels like into 2023 with high interest rates and the inability to pay that down.
All right, and so I'm gonna make a sin here. I'm gonna ask a question I don't really know the answer to, but I'd like your input. It just seems to me like with what you just said about emotional shopping and high interest rates and credit card debt and credit card usage is skyrocketing, savings rates are plummeting. All of this is shaping up to kind of give me an ominous feeling about the way forward, but it just doesn't seem to be happening, right? It seems to be taking a while. I talk about jobs a lot too, but with what we've got going on with the consumer and these Black Friday sales, I got to tell you, I was a little surprised to see them as good as they were. But having said what we just said in the run-up, with things being a lot more expensive and you're not, getting very much for your money, I guess that makes sense. But still, when do all of these moving parts come together and really kind of show us what we're kind of afraid of? I think that you're afraid of the same thing I am.
Well, let's draw a parallel here, right? And let's talk about the national debt, which is 31 trillion, 32 trillion, and growing. So what's happening there is that we have a government that is continuing to spend and spend and spend without anything to rein that in. And I think if we look at a parallel here to what individual consumers are doing, it's kind of the same thing. As our government is running up that credit card, we have individual consumers running up their credit cards. Now, at what point we actually hit the brake in all this, no one can really say. But we do know at some point you have to pay your bills, unless, of course, we're going to get an executive order similar to student debt that says, you know what, credit card debt, we'll give you a freebie on that
right.
one, which I don't think is going to happen.
If it did, Dan, I can tell you right now, you'd have to be under the age of 26, and you'd have to have a certain amount. It would be by age, because as Winston Churchill says, if you're not a liberal by the age of 25, you have no heart, and if you're not conservative by the age of 45, you have no brain. That's big old Winston Churchill. All right, so I digress. So this is one of those things that we just don't know when these dominoes are going to topple, but they're all shaping up to make sure that they're at some point going to topple. My last thing I'll say, that I'm going to talk about this with another guest that you know very well, Seth, in the C block. But it's jobs have got to be a part of this, because you can't continue to spend like this if you don't have a job.
Well, I feel the same way you do, Scott, in that I'm wondering how we're even doing what we're doing, right? There are 10 million job openings, yet we still have many people that are not interested in getting back into the workforce. Why? Well, I think they probably got too much money from the government and were incentivized during the pandemic to stay home. So where does all this lead us? I mean, I wish I could really say, but it defies all logic that the demand continues to be strong. Yet when we look at other data, it doesn't support why the data would be so strong, Scott. And especially if you look at it this way, in the last 20 months, CPI has outpaced the increase in wages.
Right.
Right? So everybody is, or generally speaking, people are falling behind.
Yep.
Yet they continue to spend. At some point in time, we have to wake up. And I think we wake up to a nightmare.
Yeah, wow, that's okay. Pretty ominous, but I think you're right. And another TV things they told me never to say is only time will tell. So I'll just say, watch this space every day, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. Okay, thank you very much, Dan Geltrude, Nutley, New Jersey. Thanks.